welcome. This presentation is titled Who Do We Find? It's the story of Bryce Canyon National Park as told by our fossils. So let's start out with who the heck am I? And thank you for that introduction, Jade. I so appreciate that. This is me working at Bryce Canyon. But I actually got my start at Dalhousie University. I'm a maritimer at heart. I did my undergraduate honors thesis on the Silurian rocks at Ericeag. So there I am at the Ericeag waterfall looking for trilobites. And then as of recent, I've actually been I work for Death Valley as an education ranger, which has a whole different suite of Western fossils and the fossil assemblage. And I'm here at Bryce right now as a Paleontology Fellow. So I've had 2 summers at Bryce, and this season will be close to a year now. And in that photo in Bryce, I've got a bone on my tongue, so you can see my laser pointer there. Um, all paleontologists know that fossil bone sticks to your tongue. So there I am doing the field test. It's a real test we do. We do it often. So here we are. Welcome to Bryce Canyon National Park, at least virtually. And who do we find here in Bryce Canyon National Park? We're in southern Utah, which Utah, you may know, is sort of famous for its fossils. As it turns out, we find a lot of fossils here in Bryce Canyon National Park. So over the past couple years, we've had a paleontology program, and that's what I've been a part of. Me and the paleo lead, my field partner, have been working to inventory and monitor these fossil localities that were previously discovered or located by a couple other folks in the area, various researchers working through local universities, particularly Dr. Jeffrey Eden. And so using his field notes, using various field notes of folks who've come through here, we put together the fossil inventory. So here we are. Here's Utah. We have all of the various rocks in Utah. Here in Bryce Canyon, we're actually at the bottom in the southern portion of Utah. We're sort of interestingly located in Utah because we cover the Cenozoic and the Mesozoic rock suite. So we have the age of dinosaurs and the age of mammals. Um, we are a busy park at Bryce Canyon. We are one of the what they call Big Five. So if you've heard of Arches and Zion and Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, Bryce is also part of that. So we are a very busy park, and we're situated in sort of an interesting area. Um, just to sort of talk a bit about the tectonic significance of where we are. Bryce Canyon here, that's circled, um, sits sort of in the Goldilocks zone. We've got the Great Basin over here on the left. So this is all the water that flows in the Great Basin gets trapped there and evaporates out. Um, it's not going to the ocean. So these are those like salt, those playa lakes. The beautiful Great Salt Lake is part of Great Basin. And then you may recognize over here is the Colorado Plateau. Bryce Canyon is right at the confluence of those two physiogeographic provinces. So we are the transition between Great Basin with the faulted and folded and beautiful suites of particularly Paleozoic rocks, and then the Colorado Plateau, which is uplifted and relatively undeformed. Um, we have the best of both worlds. So we have rock layers that are relatively straight and horizontal, not super faulted, but the park is actually defined by a super deep listric normal fault. And you can see here with my laser pointer, I'm sort of circling it, called the Paunsaugunt Fault. And so this is the front of the park, is a huge fault line, and then Bryce Canyon sort of is eroding back from that. And so actually we are the easternmost extent of Basin Range. Like if you were to look at those large faults that define Basin Range, the Paunsaugunt is the easternmost. So we really are the transition, the Goldilocks. Our rocks are pretty straight, great for measuring section and looking at stratigraphy. But we also have some cool tectonics going on in the region. So I'm biased, but I think it's pretty awesome to have both. So Bryce Canyon is also famous for being the top step of the Grand Staircase. And if you've never heard of the Grand Staircase, it is a grand staircase. I actually had a student this summer refer to it as the big step, which I will now be referring to the Grand Staircase as the big step. So it is a series of rock layers that move down in a stepwise fashion, and they actually end up in the Grand Canyon. So from the top of Bryce Canyon on the Ponskin Plateau, these pink cliffs, you are standing at the top of the staircase looking down to Grand Canyon. You can see all the way to Arizona. It's pretty special. Hopefully, this talk inspires you to have a visit, or if you have visited, it reminds you of what was special, or you just become more familiar with Western geology and plan a trip. So these are the pink cliffs. Bryce Canyon pink cliffs are the Claron Formation. They're Eocene in age, basically. They're 40 to 50 million years old. And this is why people come to Bryce Canyon, the pink cliffs. This is what the hoodoos and the rock spires are made of. But little do people know, much to the public's surprise, underneath the pink cliffs is the next step down called the gray cliffs. And these are prolific exposures of late Cretaceous rocks. So our neighbors to the east, Grand Staircase, Escalante National Monument, is full of the gray cliffs, world famous dinosaur exposures. And we have a lot of those same formations. So, the sort of beginning of the paleo program was we share these rocks. We should be keeping up with Grand Staircase. We should be inventorying what we have at the park and protecting those fossil resources because they have a lot of dinosaurs and other fossil material. So we probably do too. So just to recap, the reason people come to Bryce Canyon is that Claron Formation, the beautiful orange pink hoodoos, and that is the age of mammals. And then underneath the age of mammals, we have the age of dinosaurs, and those are the gray cliffs. A little bit more drab looking, but I assure you they're just as interesting. We don't record the KT boundary. We don't record that extinction. I wish we did. I think that would be so cool. But alas, we do not. It eroded away. So I want to just take us through time, like a good geologist, start from the bottom of the strat column, work our way up, and just introduce you to some of the cast of characters we find at this park and what that's telling us about the evolution of the environment at Bryce Canyon. We're going to start with the Tropic Shale, which is the biggest of our lower formations. This is a great reconstruction of the Tropic Shale, what it probably looked like. It was a shallow sea, essentially. If you're familiar with the chalks of Kansas, this is contemporaneous, this is the same time. The Western Interior Seaway at this time is at its maximum extent. And so we always joke at Bryce Canyon that the Tropic Shale is our oceanfront property. So it would have been kind of subhumid, subtropical, coastal, would have been an awesome time to be at Bryce Canyon with the beach at your doorstep. So I can just point with my laser pointer. Bryce Canyon would be right there, just underwater. So what do we find in the Tropic Shale? We find all sorts of critters you would expect in the ocean. This was one of my favorite finds of last season, Calignoceras vulgari. These are little ammonites, and they're really exceptionally preserved. They've got the 3D preservation. Prior field season, my field partner, paleo lead Tetran, had discovered a couple of these, like a couple fragments, and they weren't well preserved. So we went back, and I was noticing these like lenticular concretions of orange and seeing a little bit of suture marks poking through. And I was in the mood to smash rocks. And we try not to do that. We're in a national park. We're protecting the resource. But if the resource is inside the rock, we have a little bit of leeway, and we cracked open a couple of these concretions, and they were exceptionally preserved in 3 dimensions. So a really exciting find from the Tropic Shale. This summer, we had way more exciting finds in the Tropic Shale. We found baculites. These are these like conic squid friends. This was with the Prehistoric Museum. Here's Dr. Josh Lively and his volunteers. Dr. Josh Lively is at the Prehistoric Museum where we reposit our fossil finds. So we have an agreement with them. They come down and help us do some digs, and this was cool. We found our first, or relocated back to Lady site. We'd heard that there were some in the Tropic Shale, but we found them in the park boundary. More exciting for the dino nerds out there and the vertebrate nerds, we finally found our bone fragments in the Tropic Shale. We had not located any vertebrates until this season. So we know the vertebrates are there. That makes sense. There should be mosasaurs. There should be turtles. And then, sure enough, a turtle costal was found, probably protostegid. So now we have our verts from the Tropic Shale, not just our invertebrates. So this was when the sea was at maximum depth at Bryce Canyon. So these shales don't produce a lot, but it was great to locate some of these paleoenvironment indicators. So as we move up in the section, things get a little interesting. The facies change dramatically. The seaway is starting to retreat at this time during the Straight Cliffs Formation. And this is where we're getting estuaries, deltas, lagoons, beaches, dunes. Pretty interesting architecture of these facies. And they're actually not well mapped or understood to our neighboring plateaus. So this is something we're really thinking about now when we're out there. As it turns out, the Straight Cliffs are pretty prolific for us. At the bottom of the Straight Cliffs Formation is as the seaway is starting to retreat, we're getting the Smoky Hollow member, and this is a low salinity estuary deposit. And we get these awesome oysters with encrusters on them and quite a few gastropods like Admetopsis. So these would have been estuary deposits. Not just vertebrates, though. We do find vertebrates in the Straight Cliffs, actually quite a few, surprisingly. This was a really neat site. Just to give you an idea, this is Tetran, my colleague. Um, this is the search image that we're dealing with in the park. So this is what's on the ground, and I always joke that our job is one big game of Where's Waldo because we're trying to pick out the fossils from this background image. And this was a really awesome site where we located all of these fragments, and it turned out to be probably a fibula of a hadrosaur. So to give you an idea, here's the search image. Those are the bones within the search image. It was a fairly articulated piece. Once we got all the pieces, put them back together, it was, you know what? That's a whole fibula, we think. And so we sent that off to the Prehistoric Museum in Price, Utah, and Dr. Lively and his volunteers put it back together. So here it is. This summer, I finally got to hold it. Probably belonged to a hadrosaur. So there's our hadrosaur friend. We make guesses about who some of these bone fragments belong to. Statistically speaking, hadrosaurs are pretty prolific at this time. We call them cows of the Cretaceous because they are wandering around in packs, just chewing on vegetation. It's likely that quite a few of our dinosaur bone finds are hadrosaurs, but we haven't gotten any diagnostic pieces yet to name the species. So a little bit of a pivot away from bones. The really exciting part about the Straight Cliffs, at least in my biased opinion, is the dawn of the angiosperms. So late Cretaceous, we finally get the evolution of flowering plants. So we're moving away from those conifers and gymnosperms, and we get the flowering plants and these broadleaf trees. So at this time, they're really thriving. It's not like they're just coming onto the scene. They're starting to really take a hold on the scene. In fact, we've only found 2 conifers to date in the park in terms of fossil specimens. So this is my pitch to paleobotanists. If you like to do paleobotany of late Cretaceous, or if you know people who are interested in it, we have projects, we have ideas. We would love to start IDing some of these plants because the preservation is phenomenal. Some of these are, you know, essentially like edges are pristine. you should be able to get an ID on some of these. We find a lot of things from the willows, the Lauraceae family, the poplars. So these sort of like riparian and wetland thriving plants. And this makes sense because at this time in the Cretaceous, it is a wetter world. It's subtropical, and these are the lowlands next to the receding ocean. So yeah, we wouldn't have conifers. Those are probably up in the mountains, up in the Laramidian Mountains to the west. But anyways, we do get a lot of these beautiful leaf exposures. Um, I recently brought out two awesome botany-oriented friends. They helped get an ID on this guy here in the middle. I think it's cinnamomum morphotype of some kind. But this is in the, I believe this was in the Lauraceae family, which is a fairly basal angiosperm. So like early angiosperm evolution. So if you like leaves, we have leaves. Um, the other sort of compelling thing about leaves from the paleoenvironmental standpoint is most bone beds are time averaged. They've been sort of churned, sorted, collected over time. A leaf deposit, whether it's an overbank or a levee break, a splay, something happens where it is an instantaneous moment of deposition. And these leaves represent that exact moment in time and that assemblage that was present. So I think the leaves are really we also find charcoalified or like burnt remains of vegetation. So these are two pieces of burnt vegetation with weathering rinds around them. We just found this like 2 weeks ago. So it's our first, I guess, what I would call ancient forest fire, if you will. um, More to come on that. We're maybe we can correlate and investigate that a little bit further. All right, and then you might recall that I said we've only ever seen like two conifer specimens, essentially. This is one of them. We think it's Ginitzia, I believe is how it's pronounced. And you can see here it like might have like, a bud over here on the top, but and then it pokes through the bottom there. So this guy is nicely preserved. Unfortunately, we did not collect that specimen, and it is lost to the sand of time. So hopefully we can re-find it one of these days because it was a nice piece. We don't just find plants in the Straight Cliffs, of course. We've got our dinos, we got our plants. We got turtles. We have a lot of turtles, Bainids particularly. This is Naomi Kelly's. I bring up this one because when we discovered this fragment from a distance, my field partner and I were so excited because it looked like hadrosaur skin. And we got closer and we did the bone looking test. It is not. It is it is a turtle shell. But we were excited because, hadrosaur skin impressions aren't that uncommon in the Grand Staircase to our east. So we're still looking for those. Those might be out there. We also have a couple holotypes from the Straight Cliffs, some multi-tuberculates and salamander. Um, so the paleo environment, the Straight Cliffs, chock full of all sorts of cast of characters. We have basically everyone accounted for in terms of our different taxa, our vertebrates, our invertebrates. It is quite prolific, but we're still looking for those like diagnostic features so that we can start to piece together the exact genus and species of some of these friends. So as we move up out of the Straight Cliffs, we enter the Wildweep Formation in Bryce Canyon. And the Wildweep is chock full of fossils in the Grand Staircase to our east. It's it's a great formation, highly dynamic environment, as Dr. Alan Titus likes to say, lots of precipitation, lots of raging rivers. This is a floodplain. I sometimes think of this as like the coastal plain of the South. Here's our paleo environment analog. We have meandering rivers and oxbows and awesome floodplain deposits, which in theory, this is highly likely for fossil preservation. This is a good place to find fossils. So we do find fossils. In fact, we find really cool trackways, such as our three-toed hadrosaur friends. These were casts that were essentially tumbling out of a ledge. And this is John DeBlue, Utah Geological Survey, doing some photogrammetry on them last year. So this was our first dino trackway in the park, which was pretty exciting. Um, we find other things in the wall weep, other plants. So we've got sort of a changing paleo environment. We find fossil palms. So this is Sabellites, probably, or something similar. To date, we have 4 palm sites. So one of these, this like top palm figure here, I located last year, and we named the site Palm Springs. And it's one of our best sort of impressions of the palm. So again, we're in this like wetter subtropical world. It's still warm, and we have palm trees at Bryce Canyon at this time. And then, on top of the plants and the trackways, we also do have vertebrates. Uh, Top left here, this is what I like to think of as an exploded turtle, just little turtle bits that just exploded to the surface, I suppose. Here's a better carapace that is more intact. We also find a lot of osteoderms of crocodilian friends, and then nice big vertebra. So quite a few folks accounted for in the Wahweap Formation. This was by far sort of my most exciting find and interest this year in the Wahweap, though. We found this funny little pyramid-shaped thing with a strange pitted surface, and we sort of filed it away into the back of our brains and consulted a couple experts. And we think it may be the park's first notosaur or ankylosaur, uh, probably notosaurine if we had to take a stab at it. But anyways, we finally have those friends accounted for in the park stratigraphy. So this was in the Wahweap. We also get really cool teeth in the Wahweap. We get these concentrations of microfossils. This is a button tooth brachycampsa. So this is um, pretty similar to a caiman, and they had really cute little button teeth. That guy's really small. You can't tell, but those are centimeters for all my Canadians. I stay with my centimeter scale card, obviously. So this is a 1 centimeter tooth, and it was just floating at the surface. Um, we also get other teeth. This is a dental battery that would have held teeth, probably the Ornithischian. Again, we're taking a statistical guess here, but a hadrosaur of some kind. So many teeth in the Wahweap. So that sort of brings us to this beautiful figure that my colleague Tatran did of our assemblage, of our fossil assemblage that we have pieced together over the past couple of years of paleo inventory of our Cretaceous friends. So as you can see, we have very dynamic, evolving ecologies. These ecosystems are so varied and interesting, everything from deep water to shallow shore face to deltas, lagoons, estuaries, rivers, floodplains. We basically have it all accounted for in the Cretaceous. So pretty exciting stuff hiding underneath those hoodoos. Okay, but what about the hoodoos? Are there any fossils in the hoodoos? That's the question. This is why people come to Bryce Canyon, is the orange pink rocks of the Claron Formation and their cool little chimneys and spires and stacks. Um, just sort of a side note, this is Thor's hammer. This is a very like iconic hoodoo in the park, and it's got this cap of dolomite, resistant dolomite on top of some mudstone layers that are eroding out. So pretty iconic landscape. Are there fossils in this iconic landscape? Kind of. If we look at the paleo environment of the Claron, it was a large system of a large freshwater lake. It's contemporaneous with the Green River Formation. If you've ever been to a gift shop with like a fossil fish on a slab, it's likely from the Green River Formation. And so this is similar time period, and this is the age of mammals. Like we're getting a high diversification of mammals at this time. Where are our fossils in the Claron? Well, we don't really see vertebrate fossils in the Claron. In fact, we joke that it's the barren Claron. Um, we get some gastropods as far as body fossils go. Here's some snails I found last week. This is viviparous, I believe is how you pronounce it. Freshwater snails. So that's that's kind of exciting. But then other than snails, um, we really just have the microscopic stuff. This is from the Clarion Formation. Jeffrey Eaton did some screen washing, and these are just absolutely tiny, tiny little teeth of marsupials, insectivores, you know, things that we'd expect at this rise of mammals. We haven't located these in the Clarion in the park yet. So these are outside park boundaries. So we know they're there, but they're tiny. Basically, we get snails and very tiny teeth. And then on top of that, um, we get burrows. This formation is notorious for its trace fossil assemblage. So we get a plethora of burrows from insects. Um, these here, this is probably Parowinecnus wasp burrows, essentially. Um, Tons of burrows. So if you think about the paleo environment of the Clarion, we think of it as sort of a lake system, but we're not seeing any fossils that you'd see in the lake system that you get in Green River. It's probably more likely that this is, and there's some recent publications supporting this, that this is a intermontane plain. So the Laramide Mountains are surrounding um, lots of loess deposits, and there's paleosol, so ancient soils being stacked upon each other, and the water table is shifting up and down, and there's a lot of carbonate in this dust that is basically precipitating out as these calcrete layers. And these insects are burrowing and raising and lowering in response to the water table. So we can use these insect burrows as paleoenvironmental proxies in substitute for some of these like bigger vertebrate fossils. Um, we located this really cool burrow fossil, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago now, so this is pretty cool. We knew that there were some of these burrows in the park, this specific genera and species, but we had yet to really locate good exposures of them, and this was a really good site. It's called Echinus utahensis. That's the burrow, and it looks like kind of a hand grenade. It's got these really cool whorls. Um, and recent interpretations of it, I just think this is really exciting and cool. They're dung beetle pupation chambers. So dung beetles were burrowing down and making these little spiral helical burrows and putting their pupa in there. So lots of those. So picturing a world in the Clarion Formation where there are these ancient soils full of dung beetles and wasps and ants and bees, and then maybe a couple tiny teeth being washed in from the rivers. So insect paradise. Potentially, is the Clarion just hostile to the preservation of bones? Maybe. A lot of this remains to be really understood. So that sort of brings us to like, what's next? What are these questions that are coming up for us? What's next for the park? Now that the fossil inventory has been completed, we are working on writing the management plan for the fossil resources because they're abundant and sometimes they're eroding onto the trails. And we have to protect these resources for in perpetuity for future generations and also for researchers who want to answer some questions in this prolific area of the world. Southern Utah is known for its fossil exposures now. So we want to keep up with sort of um, that goalpost here. And the biggest thing we have going on is stratigraphy. We are really excited about nailing down the park's stratigraphy. As I said previously, the facies, the like environments that we get are just changing and so interesting the way they stack upon each other. Like architecturally, it is so interesting to go from these deep water environments to coastal plain and then have ancient soils on top. So really cool assemblage of lithofacies. And one of the things we want to do is zircon dating. So we're trying to date these layers so that we can correlate it across the plateaus, which have better dates. The other thing we're really thinking about is that biostratigraphic framework. So this is a jargon term, but ichnofacies, these are the burrows we have in the Clarion. Can we lump them together in these horizons as like specific groups that represent types of environments and start to correlate those to other exposures of the Clarion Formation? And something that's sort of exciting and new that we're really thinking about is we're realizing that the Clarion Formation occurs during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. And if you know anything about that, it is the most abrupt climate disruptance in the Cenozoic. It is a sudden warming. It is analogous to modern global warming in terms of CO2 emission in the atmosphere. And we document that in our Clarion formation. We should be able to see that highly negative carbon isotope excursion with stable isotopes. And maybe this can start to explain that why we don't get vertebrate fossils in the Clarion like we expected. Maybe this is a basin or, a intermontane plain of less deposits. And all the mammals went up in the mountains, and all the big vertebrates are up in the mountains where it's cooler because it is warming abruptly. So hard to say what will come of that, but we're just really excited to start answering some of these research questions. And now that we have the inventory, now that we have a framework for the fossils at the park. Very quickly, this is a collaborative ordeal. We have so many awesome collaborators, but first and foremost is Dr. Jeffrey Eaton, who was a professor at Weber State University. He is the foundation of the Bryce Canyon fossil record. He and his students went out there and collected and mapped. We use his field notes to inform our framework. So without Jeffrey Eaton, we would not be here. And then my colleague and the paleo team lead is Tut Tran. His work has just been above and beyond, and I stole some of these slides from him, so thank you, Tut. And we've also had paleo staff, Dakota and Claire, so just invaluable members of the paleo team. And the Prehistoric Museum, of course, Dr. Josh Lively and his volunteers. They've been awesome in helping us with prep work and repositing our fossils. So that is a lot of information about our very niche and special park. I am going to leave it there. And if anyone has any questions, I'm just always excited to talk fossils. So thank you all so much.